Russian dictator Vladimir Putin disgraced himself by publicly telling about the breakthrough of the Russian armed forces to the Sumy region. This operation turned out to be a failure. The Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group was destroyed. The Russian Z Resource Northern Channel, which is associated with the Russian armed forces, spoke frankly about this. He accused the commanders of the Russian armed forces of setting up Putin. According to Z Channel, there have been several attempts to break through the border into Sumy Oblast recently. None of them were successful. The fighters of the 83rd Brigade have been visiting Sumy Oblast relatively regularly over the past month. In mid-January, 10 of our fighters were captured there, then actively distributed this video. Recently, they also went to Zhuravka, which is 400 meters from the border. The guys did not return from there. Our group of the 83rd Brigade entered Sumy Oblast and was destroyed, the Russian resource wrote. He specified that the 83rd Assault Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces was tasked with breaking through to Sumy region and cutting off the Ukrainian Armed Forces logistics routes to Sudzha on February the 15th to the 18th. The task was not completed. At this very moment, the 810th Marine Brigade north of Guevo is conducting an assault. This is a real setup. The Marines were pretty badly battered, but they were also transferred to that area. Nothing good can come of this. What are they reporting to the president? Z Channel wrote. It should be noted that Putin's words were also refuted by Dmitry Likovy, an officer of the main communications directorate of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. He noted that the Russians tried to advance across the border in the Nikolaevo-Darino-Zhuravka section. There, they were met by the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and the enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group was defeated. There is no reason to panic, the officer assured. The head of the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Andriy Kovalenko, said that success of the Russian armed forces near Kursk, which the military reported to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, does not actually exist. There is no large-scale offensive of the Russian army in the Kursk direction. Kovalenko, commenting on his words, reported that last night a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group tried to penetrate the Sumy region. They were met by the Ukrainian armed forces and destroyed. He specified that enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups regularly attempt to break through the border. The Ukrainian Defense Forces now have to fight them. A group of Russian troops that would be capable of carrying out a large-scale offensive on Ukrainian territory does not exist at the moment. Putin's information about a large-scale offensive by the Russians is a lie, the head of the center assured. Britain is ready to send Typhoon fighter jets to patrol the skies over Ukraine to help ensure peace. According to The Times, British officials discussed how security guarantees could be met without requiring large numbers of ground troops. A senior government source told the publication that the air policing mission makes sense, although it requires a significant number of aircraft and air defense systems to protect them. The UK-led air policing mission could be modeled on NATO missions already underway in the Baltics, the publication wrote. A source said to The Times that that was more likely. The planes could be based in Poland. Discussions are at an early stage, but the source said, "We are prepared to do whatever we are asked to do." The air patrol mission would involve aircraft armed to the teeth and ready to take off. The no-fly zone would require the planes to patrol the skies 24 hours a day. A Ministry of Defense spokeswoman said the UK will take a leading role in supporting a lasting peace in Ukraine that will protect its sovereignty and deter Putin from further aggression in the future. As the publication noted, dozens of Typhoons could be on alert for any Russian attacks, while smaller peacekeeping forces from the UK and other European countries would provide protection on the ground. At the same time, one of the publication's sources hinted that it is unclear how all this will stop Russian dictator Putin from violating any agreement. The fact is that European officials doubt that Europe alone will be able to create a ground peacekeeping force sufficient to patrol the entire Ukrainian-Russian border, even if the Kremlin agrees. Some diplomats expressed the view that a UN peacekeeping force was more realistic and that Russia would likely support that prospect. British Defense Secretary John Healey said only the US could stop Putin from attacking Ukraine again. Only the US can provide the deterrence to Putin that will prevent him from attacking again, and the details of that are being worked out now, he said. Healey's view echoes that of Prime Minister Keir Starmer and NATO allies, who believe any peacekeeping force would require some kind of US involvement. The publication noted that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky also believes that Europe cannot guarantee Ukraine's security without the United States because it has too few soldiers. He said that 110,000 peacekeepers may be needed to ensure peace, although in reality 3 times more is needed if rotation is taken into account. The EU is considering a much smaller figure of 25,000 to 30,000 troops as part of a potential ceasefire, according to the Washington Post. However, a Ukrainian military source said such a force would be nothing for Ukraine's vast shared border with Russia. The biggest source of tension within the Russian elites in 2024 was the purge of the defense ministry. The Moscow Times media outlet recalls that Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu was moved to a different post, and several dozen officials were detained over the course of many months, including 3 former deputy defense ministers. The shake-up was likely conceived as a way to improve the management of Russia's ballooning military spending. In order to speed up the process of clearing out Shoigu-era placeholders, the Kremlin opted for a method that could be described as rotation through repression. This is not a new approach, but the scale of what occurred at the ministry is unprecedented. The purge has not only redirected rent flows associated with the ministry, but also led to the dismantling of Shoigu's entire clan within the Russian elite. Although Shoigu seems for the moment to be under the personal protection of President Vladimir Putin, he has been powerless to intervene in unfolding events. The Moscow Times says that the easiest way to understand the purge is to look at the criminal cases that followed the first and most high-profile arrest, that of Shoigu's longtime associate, ex-Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov. Each wave of arrests seemed to lead to new arrests in turn, as well as generate new charges against Ivanov himself. After Ivanov's arrest in April 2024, he was charged with the embezzlement of 1.18 billion rubles or $11.5 million. That was followed by the arrest of 2 other senior officials at the Defense Ministry, Yuri Kuznetsov, accused of selling state secrets to contractors linked with Ivanov, and Vladimir Verteletsky, who oversaw spending on digitization. All 3 men maintained their innocence, and Ivanov's lawyer sought to get him moved to house arrest on the basis that Ivanov was subject to Western sanctions, had participated in military action, and been decorated. Ultimately, however, none of that helped. On the contrary, there was another wave of arrests in July arising from the documents seized by investigators in April. This time, the men who ended up behind bars were Andrei Belkov, a military contractor used by Ivanov, and another former deputy defense minister, Dmitry Bulgakov. In turn, the July arrests led to another rash of criminal cases that encompassed construction and military logistics as a whole. As a result of the arrest of Bulgakov, security officers detained the head of military equipment retailer Vontog, Vladimir Pavlov, and several of his business associates. A third wave of arrests in August included the head of the war-themed Patriot Park, Vyacheslav Akhmedov, and yet another former defense minister, Pavel Popovu, was close to Shoigu. Since then, the arrests have spread to numerous institutions connected to the former leadership of the defense ministry, varying from Rosgvardia, Russia's National Guard, which is also involved in state defense contracts, to a little-known organization, Oboronles, which manages forests on the territory of military bases and supplies timber to the government of the Moscow region. The Moscow Times recalls that in 8 months of purges, therefore, several major rent flows have been disrupted and charges filed against dozens of officials linked with Shoigu across a whole spectrum of different agencies and organizations. Ivanov is currently implicated in 2 criminal cases, and investigators have hinted there may be more to come. Neither Ivanov nor Popov have sought to cut a deal with investigators. By pushing ahead to seize the 2 men's assets, though, it appears investigators want to pressure them to give evidence against Shoigu himself. When given the green light to these arrests, it's possible Putin didn't expect investigators to take to their task with such enthusiasm. But the rivalries between Russia's security agencies run deep, and the Federal Security Service and the Investigative Committee have accumulated many grudges against the military over the years. Evidently, they've decided to take full advantage of the opportunity, both reanimating old criminal cases and opening new ones.